Get her out of the seat. Now. The command echoed through first class as two officers closed in on Dr. Serafina Vance, tearing her from seat 1A, while stunned passengers watched in silence. Her blazer ripped. Her work spilled across the aisle. A woman sipping champagne smirked as the flight attendant nodded in approval. To them, Serafina was just another black woman who didn't belong. What they didn't know, what made this moment catastrophic, was that the woman they were dragging off the plane wasn't just a passenger. She was the final ethics authority on an $80 billion government contract. And in trying to erase her, they had just erased their entire airline. The first-class Polaris lounge at John F. Kennedy International Airport was a muted sanctuary of clinking glasses and whispered conversations. It was designed to be a buffer, a place where the world's friction couldn't reach. For Dr. Serafina Vance, it was a necessary moment of decompression. She had just concluded a grueling 72-hour non-stop coding and review session for a project that could redefine ethical AI. Her mind, usually a fortress of logic and code, felt frayed. She was a tall woman, her hair braided into intricate patterns that rested on the shoulder of her tailored navy blue blazer. She was 38, but her eyes held the steady, patient weight of someone who had fought for every inch of her success. A double doctorate from MIT, a resume that included DARPA, and now the head of her own wildly successful consultancy, Ethos Machines. Serafina was by any metric at the pinnacle of her field. Her seat 1A on the cross-country flight to Washington, D.C. wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity. She needed to sleep on the flight to arrive, rested for the most important meeting of her career. As she sipped her water, she felt the familiar prickle of observation. A man 2 tables over, in an ill-fitting suit, was staring, not in admiration, but with a kind of dull, questioning surprise. It was a look she had catalogued 1,000 times. It said, "How did you get in here?" She held his gaze, her expression unreadable, until he looked away, flustered. This was the prologue to her life in transit. She was a ghost in the machine of high society, a black woman who had bypassed the traditional gatekeepers and built her own door. And they still hadn't figured out how she'd done it. The boarding call for Apex Air Flight 112 to Dallas was announced. Serafina gathered her belongings, a sleek minimalist leather briefcase containing a laptop that held more secrets than most government agencies. She walked to Gate 42. The priority boarding lane was a small crowd of suits and designer handbags. She took her place in line. The gate agent, a thin woman named Brenda, according to her name tag, called for first-class passengers. Serafina stepped forward. "Mom," Brenda said, her voice high and tight. "This is for first-class boarding only." Serafina paused, the words hanging in the air. She looked at the sign, then at Brenda, then slowly presented her boarding pass, which clearly read Vance Sat 1A. Brenda's eyes flickered over it. There was no apology, just a faint flush. She scanned the ticket. "Beep. Enjoy your flight," she said. The words clipped, already turning to the next passenger. Serafina said nothing. She walked down the jet bridge, her footsteps echoing. It was a small slight, a paper cut, but it was the first of 1,000 that day. She entered the quiet cabin of the Boeing 77. A flight attendant, a man in his late 40s with a plastic smile and a name tag that read, Mark, greeted her. "Welcome aboard. Can I see your boarding pass?" He hadn't asked the white man who boarded just ahead of her. "Serafina Vance, seat 1A, she said, holding his gaze, not bothering to show the pass he hadn't earned the right to see again. "1A is to your left," he said, his smile tightening. She found her seat, the spacious pod at the very front of the plane. It was perfect. She settled in, placing her briefcase at her feet, and began the small ritual of disconnection. Noise-cancelling headphones, a bottle of water, a silk sleep mask. She just needed 2 hours of peace. She closed her eyes, tuning out the sounds of the remaining passengers boarding. She was almost safe, almost asleep, and then she heard the voice. "Excuse me. Excuse me." Serafina opened her eyes. A woman stood in the aisle, impeccably dressed in a cream-colored St. John knit suit, her blonde hair a perfect helmet like Bob. She looked to be in her early 50s, her face a mask of expensive entitled annoyance. "You're in my seat," the woman snapped. Serafina took a slow breath, pulling her headphones down to her neck. "I'm sorry. I think there's a mistake. This is 1A. I know perfectly well what seat this is." The woman said, her voice loud enough to carry through the quiet cabin. "And it's mine. My name is Caroline Harrington." She waved her boarding pass, a paper ticket, like a royal decree. Ms. Harrington Serafina said, her voice low and calm. "My boarding pass also says 1A. Perhaps we can ask the flight attendant to sort this out." "There's nothing to sort out." Caroline's voice rose to a theatrical pitch. "You're in my seat. Get up. Some people just try to take what isn't theirs." The implication, sharp and venomous, landed in the cabin air. Serafina felt the flush of anger, but she pushed it down, locking it behind a wall of professional detachment. This was a problem to be solved, not a fight to be had. Mark, the flight attendant, bustled over his face, a mask of concern, but not for Serafina. "Mrs. Harrington, is there a problem? So good to see you again." "Mark, thank heavens," Caroline said, grasping his arm. "This woman is in my seat and she's refusing to move." Mark turned to Serafina, his plastic smile gone, replaced by a stern, impatient frown. "Mom, you heard her. You need to move." "Mark," Serafina said, keeping her voice level. "My name is Dr. Vance, and this is my assigned seat. Here is my boarding pass." She held up her phone, the digital pass clearly displayed. "Vance, S1A Apex Platinum." Mark barely glanced at it. He was focused on Caroline. "Mrs. Harrington is one of our most valued flyers, Mom. There must be a system error. Your actual seat is probably in the back." "My actual seat," Serafina repeated the words, tasting like ash, "is 1A. I am a platinum member. I booked this ticket 6 months ago. Please scan my pass. Scan hers. You will see, this is my seat." "I don't need to scan anything," Mark said, his voice rising. "I'm not going to have one of my best customers harassed. Now I'm asking you politely. Please gather your things, and I'll find you another seat." "I will not be found another seat," Serafina said, her voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "I'm in the seat I paid for. I'm not moving." The cabin was now silent. Every passenger in the first-class section was watching. A young man in 2B Ben discreetly lifted his phone and began to record. Caroline Harrington let out a small, theatrical gasp. "She's being aggressive. Mark, she's threatening me. I don't feel safe." This was the magic word, the one that turned bias into procedure. Mark's face hardened. He stepped closer to Serafina's pod. "Mum, you are creating a disturbance. You are threatening another passenger. If you do not vacate the seat immediately, I will have you removed from this aircraft." On what grounds? Serafina demanded, her own anger finally breaking through her control. For existing, for holding a valid ticket. "I am being harassed by her." "And you are complicit." "That's it," Mark snapped. "You are a threat to this flight safety. You're belligerent. I'm calling the captain and airport security." He turned and marched toward the cockpit. Caroline Harrington smirked, a tiny triumphant twitch of her lips. She took the open seat 1B across the aisle, crossing her legs as if settling in to watch a show. Serafina sat frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. This wasn't happening. She had a meeting, a career-defining billion-dollar meeting. She couldn't be removed. She looked at the faces watching her. Pity from a few, annoyance from others, and from Caroline. Pure, unadulterated victory. Ben in 2B was still recording. He zoomed in on Serafina's face, capturing the mixture of disbelief and fury, then pawned to Caroline, who was casually sipping the pre-departure champagne Mark had rushed to give her. A few minutes later, 2 Port Authority police officers appeared at the aircraft door. They were large men, their faces grim, their hands already on their utility belts. "Mark," one of them said. "What's the problem?" "This passenger in 1A," Mark said, pointing. "She's being disorderly. She assaulted another passenger and is refusing to deplane. We need her off." Assaulted. The lie was so blatant, so audacious, it stole Serafina's breath. "Mom," the first officer, Sullivan, according to his tag, said, "you need to come with us." Officer Serafina said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I have not assaulted anyone. I am in my assigned seat. This woman," she gestured to Caroline, "is lying. And this flight attendant is enabling her. My name is Dr. Serafina Vans. I have a digital copy of my boarding pass, my driver's license, and my government-issued credentials. I don't care who you are." Sullivan said, his voice flat. "The airline wants you off. You're coming off. Grab your bag. I will not." "I am being removed unjustly," Serafina said. She knew her rights, but she also saw the non-negotiable steel in his eyes. "Last chance, ma'am. I am not moving." "Fine," Sullivan said. He signaled his partner. "Get her." The moment Officer Sullivan said, "Get her," the civilized veneer of the first-class cabin dissolved. The second officer, Kent, moved in. He was younger, more bulk than brains, and he reached for Serafina's arm. "Do not touch me," Serafina said, her voice a command. "I am not resisting. I am seated." "Mom, you're creating a public spectacle." Kent grunted, grabbing her wrist. Serafina instinctively pulled back. "You are hurting me. She's resisting." Sullivan shouted as if to justify his next action. He lunged, grabbing Serafina by her blazer. The fabric ripped. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent cabin. "Oh my God," a woman in 3A whispered. Ben in 2B held his phone steady. His knuckles were white. He was capturing everything. "Get off of me," Serafina yelled. A lifetime of suppressed rage welling up. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about every stare, every Brenaire at the gate, every Mark who saw her as a threat instead of a peer. The officers didn't listen. They were a machine of procedure, and the procedure was remove the problem. Sullivan grabbed her other arm. Kent got a grip on her waist. "I am a doctor." She shouted, not as a plea for status, but as a desperate assertion of her humanity. "I am a citizen. You have no right." They dragged her from the pod. Her briefcase spilled open a laptop, a confidential binder, and a stack of papers marked either Project Eyes only scattered into the aisle. "My bag, my work," she cried. "We'll get it," Sullivan said dismissively. They were hauling her, literally dragging her up the aisle. Her shoes came off. The sleeve of her silk blouse tore. She was half carrying, half falling, her body scraping against the armrests. She looked at the faces of the other passengers. They were a blur of shock, fear, and averted gazes. No one helped. No one said a word except Caroline Harrington. As Serafina was dragged past seat 1B, Caroline looked her dead in the eye, her expression bored, and took a delicate sip of her champagne. The humiliation was a physical, scalding thing. Ben's phone captured it all. The grunting officers, the rip of fabric, Serafina's desperate, intelligent face contorted in pain and rage, and the final haunting shot of Caroline Harrington's indifferent sip of champagne. They reached the galley. Mark, the flight attendant, stood against the wall, his arms crossed his face, a mask of self-righteousness. "See?" he said to the officers. "Told you she was trouble." They didn't respond. They hauled Serafina through the aircraft door and onto the jet bridge. The cold, sterile light of the terminal felt like a spotlight. As they passed the gate, Brenda looked on her face, pale, as if she was just now realizing the magnitude of what she had started. They didn't stop. They dragged her all the way to the terminal, where her cries of, "You're hurting me and what is my crime?" were lost in the ambient noise of airport announcements. They finally stopped at a small grey substation for the Port Authority police. They pushed her into a chair. "What am I being charged with?" Serafina demanded, pulling the tattered remains of her blazer around her. "Disorderly conduct resisting arrest, trespassing on an aircraft." Sullivan recited, his voice monotone. "Trespassing? I had a valid first-class ticket." "Not according to the airline," Sullivan said, turning to a computer. "They're the ones who get to say who flies." 2 hours. That's how long they kept her. 2 hours in a cold concrete room. Her phone had been put in a plastic bag with her remaining shoe. Her briefcase, she was told, was still on the plane probably. She sat vibrating with a cold, precise fury. The meeting in DC was at 8:00 a.m. the next morning. Her career, her reputation, the ethics of a multi-billion-dollar project, All of it was being held hostage in a concrete box at JFK because Carolyn Harrington wanted her seat. Finally, a different officer, a sergeant, opened the door. He looked uncomfortable. He wasn't holding her phone. He was holding his phone. "Dr. Vance," he said, his voice tentative. "Yes." He turned the phone around. On the screen was a Twitter video posted 90 minutes ago by a user named Ben in 2B. The video, shaky and raw, was already at 10 million views. The caption read, "Apex Air just dragged a black woman from first class so a valued flyer in 1B could have her seat. This is disgusting." The video was of her screams, her ripped clothes, and the champagne sip. The sergeant cleared his throat. There seems to have been a misunderstanding. You're free to go." A misunderstanding. Serafina's voice was dangerously soft. A misunderstanding is when you take the wrong black suitcase from the carousel. This was assault. This was battery. She couldn't find the word big enough. "Look, lady," the sergeant said, his brief moment of discomfort replaced by bureaucratic defense. "Your property is on the table. You're not being charged. Just go." Serafina stood on unsteady legs. She gathered her single shoe, her phone, and her ripped blazer. "Where is my briefcase? It contains classified government-adjacent material." The sergeant's eyes widened slightly at classified. "It's where locating it. The airline has it." "Get it and get me my lawyer," Serafina said. She was allowed to use her phone. Her fingers, still trembling, dialed a number from memory. "Robert," she said, her voice cracking for the first time. "It's Serafina. I'm at JFK. I'm in trouble." Robert Thorne was not just a lawyer. He was a shark. And he was Serafina's shark. He was the one who read her corporate contracts, the one who had protected her patents. He was at her side in under an hour. He found her in the police substation, refusing to sign a single piece of paper, glaring a hole into Officer Sullivan, who had been called back. Robert, impeccably dressed in a Tom Ford suit, took in the scene with a single sweeping glance. Serafina's disheveled state, the tattered blazer on the table, the officer's defensive postures. "Clear the room," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "My client and I will be speaking alone. This is our substation pal," Sullivan started. "And in 5 minutes it's going to be the set of a press conference announcing an $80 million lawsuit against you, the Port Authority, and Apex Air. Unless you give me 5 minutes, your choice." They left. "Serafina, are you hurt?" Robert asked, his voice softening. "My pride, my reputation, and my work," she whispered. "Robert, they threw my work on the floor. The ether binder." Robert's face went grim. "Okay, first we're getting you out of here. Then we're going to war." Meanwhile, in the digital world, the war had already begun. Ben in 2B. Ben Richardson, a 22-year-old software developer, hadn't just posted the video. He had tagged Apex Air. He had tagged every major news outlet. He had used the hashtags flying while Black Apex Air Shame and Justice for 1A. By the time Serafina and Robert walked out of the substation, the video had 50 million views. The stock ticker for Apex Air APX was a cascading waterfall of red. In 2 hours, the airline had lost over $500 million in market value. Their first public relations statement, issued by a low-level social media manager, was a catastrophe. Apex Air is aware of a dispute between 2 passengers on Flight 112. We apologize for the disturbance. We are working to gather all the facts. The replies were brutal. A dispute. You dragged a paying customer out of her seat. We saw the facts. We saw the champagne. Fire Mark. Fire your CEO. Liquidate your company. By the time Serafina was in a car with Robert heading to a secure hotel, the second video had dropped. Ben, feeling emboldened, had posted the 30-second clip he took before the police arrived. The one of Serafina calmly showing her ticket and Mark's escalating biased language. It was no longer a dispute. It was a clear-cut case of racial bias and corporate malfeasance. The real names were now public. Ben had zoomed in on Caroline Harrington. Amateur internet sleuths, fueled by righteous indignation, had identified her in minutes. Caroline Harrington, of the Harrington Logistics family. A viral tweet read, "Apparently, her time is more valuable than a black doctor's." The Harrington Logistics website crashed from the sudden influx of negative traffic. Serafina sat in the back of the town car wrapped in a blanket Robert had procured, watching the world burn on her phone. "Robert," she said, her voice. "The ether meeting. It's tomorrow." I've already made the call," Serafina, Robert said, his face illuminated by his own phone. "I told the DoD Procurement Board you were unavoidably detained in a security incident. They're concerned. They're postponing the final review by 48 hours. That's good," she said, relief washing over her. "No, it's not," Robert said, his face dark. "It's just bought us time. The real problem is that you were flying to that meeting on an Apex Air ticket. And Apex Air is a subcontractor on the Ether project." Serafina's blood ran cold. What their entire logistics division is bidding for the transport and deployment part of the contract. They're a partner on the bid. Serafina closed her eyes. The incident was no longer just a personal violation. It was a professional catastrophe that she had, however, unwillingly just dragged her most important project into. And Robert, she said, a terrible sinking feeling in her stomach. "Who is the other bidder, the main competitor to Apex for that subcontract?" Robert scrolled through his phone. He stopped and his knuckles went white. "You're not going to believe this." He turned the phone to Serafina. The screen showed a press release. Harrington Logistics, the other main bidder, is Harrington Logistics. The news hit Serafina like a physical blow. This wasn't a random act of entitlement. This wasn't a coincidence. "Robert," she said, her mind racing, processing the new data. "Caroline Harrington. She knew. She must have known who I was. She knew I was on that review board. It's a possibility," Robert said, his lawyer brain catching up. "A very, very strong one. She didn't just want your seat, Serafina. She wanted you off this flight. She wanted you to miss that meeting." The implication was staggering. This was corporate sabotage wrapped in the mundane, everyday evil of racism. "Get me everything on her," Serafina commanded. "Flight records. When did she book? Did she change her flight? I want to know if she was following me." "I'm already on it," Robert said. "But first, we need to deal with the immediate fallout." The immediate fallout was currently on a private G5 jet hurtling from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. Richard Sterling, the CEO of Apex Air, had not slept. He had been in a board meeting via video for 6 straight hours, watching his company's reputation and stock price be emulated in real time. Firemark. One board member had screamed, "He's been fired. His union is already fighting it, but he's gone." Richard had yelled back, "What about the police? Can we sue them? We are them. We called them. We are on the hook." Richard Sterling was a man who believed every problem had a price. His job was to find that price. He landed at Dallas at 3:00 a.m. and drove directly to the hotel where Robert Thorne had suggested they meet. He didn't come alone. He brought his general counsel and 2 public relations crisis managers. The meeting took place at 4:00 a.m. in a sterile, oversized conference room at the Ritz-Carlton. Serafina was there. She had showered, her hair was rebraided, and she was wearing a fresh suit Robert's assistant had delivered. She looked once again like a fortress. "Dr. Vance." Richard Sterling began, his voice thick with a rehearsed growly sincerity. He spread his hands wide. "On behalf of the 50,000 employees of Apex Air, I am here to offer my deepest, most profound, and most humble apology." Serafina said nothing. She simply stared, her gaze flat and analytical. What happened to you was inexcusable. It was horrifying. It is not who we are. It is, Serafina said, her first word in the meeting. It is exactly who you are. Your gate agent questioned my ticket. Your flight attendant gave my seat away. Your pilot authorized my removal. And your company, Mr. Sterling, is the one who called the police on a paying customer. This is not a bug in your system. This is your system. Richard's face twitched. This was not going to be easy. "You're right," he said. "Changing tactics? You are 100% right, and I am here to fix it. Mark, the flight attendant has been terminated. The gate agent has been suspended. We are launching a full-scale top-to-bottom review of our buyers training, and we would be honored if you would agree to help us lead it." "I am not for hire," Serafina said. "Of course not. Of course not," Richard said, flustered. "This is about reparations. We are prepared to offer you a settlement for your trouble for the humiliation." His lawyer slid a piece of paper across the table. Robert Thorne glanced at it, then pushed it back. "This is an insult. You think Dr. Vance is for sale? You think you can put a price on this? Everyone has a price." "Mr. Thorne," Richard said, his own frustration breaking through, "and we are prepared to be very generous. Name your number." "7 figures 8. You don't have enough money," Serafina said, standing up. "You don't have enough money to buy back my dignity. You don't have enough money to erase that video. And you definitely don't have enough money to fix the problem you've just created." Richard Sterling was confused. "The video. We are working on that. We will issue a new apology, a personal one from you, Dr. Vance, if you'd be willing." Serafina laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "Mr. Sterling," she said, "you still think this is about a video? You still think this is about me? You have no idea what really happened on that flight, do you?" Richard looked at his general counsel, who just shrugged. "I am not just a black doctor," Serafina said, walking to the window which overlooked the dark sleeping Capitol. "I am Dr. Serafina Vance, the lead ethics auditor for the DoD's Ether project." Richard Sterling's face went white. He knew the Ether project. It was the $80 billion AI defense contract. It was the contract his airline's logistics division was desperately trying to win. You're on the review board," he whispered. "I'm not on the review board, Mr. Sterling," Serafina said, turning back to him. "As of this week, I am the review board. My audit is the final word, the yes or no. The meeting I was flying to, the one your airline prevented me from attending, was the final ethics and compliance hearing." Richard Sterling collapsed into his chair. He didn't just see a PR crisis anymore. He saw $80 billion, his entire company's future, his legacy, all of it, circling the drain. "You didn't just assault a passenger," Serafina said, her voice a steel trap. "You assaulted the one person on Earth who holds the fate of your company in her hands. And you did it for Caroline Harrington." The name Caroline Harrington hung in the stale 4 a.m. air of the conference room. Richard Sterling, who had built an empire on logistics and risk assessment, was finally painfully processing the data. Harrington Logistics," he stammered. Our competitor, your competitor." Robert Thorne confirmed, stepping forward like a predator that had patiently waited for its prey to bleed out. "The only other serious bidder for the Ether contract. And you just gift-wrapped them the biggest defense deal of the decade." No, we can fix this," Richard said, scrambling. I'll fly you there myself. We'll get you to the meeting. We will drop our bid right now. We concede. We will drop our bid in favor of no one. We're out. Will that fix it?" He was desperate. He was willing to sacrifice the $80 billion contract if it meant he could staunch the bleeding from the other wound: the lawsuit, the public humiliation, the personal liability. Serafina just looked at him with a kind of profound academic pity. "You still don't get it," she said. "You think this is a negotiation? You think you can drop your bid and make this go away?" She sat down directly opposite him. "Let me explain to you what is going to happen now, Mr. Sterling, whether I want it to or not. First," she said, holding up one finger, "the Department of Defense. They now know that a key partner in their Ether bid, Apex Air, has an internal security and bias problem so profound that they assaulted a high-level government auditor. Your company's access to sensitive projects is over. Not just this one, all of them. You're done." Richard's face was ashen. Second, she continued, the other partner, Harrington Logistics. "You think they just won?" "Oh no." Robert Thorne spoke up. "My team has been working for the last 8 hours. We subpoenaed the flight records. Guess what we found?" He clicked a button on his laptop and a projection appeared on the wall. It was Caroline Harrington's travel itinerary. Ms. Harrington was originally booked on a flight from a different airport to a different city, Robert said, pointing. Then 2 days ago, just after Dr. Vance's travel was confirmed to the DoD board, Ms. Harrington changed her flight. Then she changed it again. And a third time, 3 changes in 24 hours. All to make sure she was on the exact same flight as Dr. Vance. And she paid a $5,000 premium to ensure she was in the seat next to her. This wasn't a coincidence, Serafina said. This was a planned, premeditated act of corporate espionage. Richard's general counsel, a man who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke. That's a federal crime. Interference with a government contract, conspiracy to commit fraud. Bingo. Robert said, smiling. And it gets better. He clicked to the next slide. A series of emails. This, Robert said, is an email from Mark the flight attendant to a private account sent last night. Job is done. She's off. Wire the rest? And the reply from an anonymous encrypted server. Please doing business. He was paid. Richard whispered, horrified. He was paid to do it. Not just him, Robert said. We're still tracing the payments to the gate agent. It seems Brenda got a nice little bonus too. Caroline Harrington didn't just show up and hope for a biased employee. She bought them. She manufactured the entire confrontation, knowing that in a her word against a black woman's scenario, the system would work exactly as designed. She weaponized racism. Serafina stood up. The meeting was over. So, here is what's going to happen, Mr. Sterling. She said, her voice final. You are going to go back to your board, and you are going to tell them that you have not only lost the ether contract, but you are now a person of interest in a federal investigation into corporate sabotage. My company will be destroyed. He said, his voice a ghost. Yes, Serafina said it will, because you built it on a foundation that believes a valued customer like Caroline Harrington is worth more than a disruptive passenger like me. You let the fox into the hen house, and it turns out the fox was a wolf, and the hen was the one person keeping your entire farm from being repossessed. She walked to the door. Robert will be in touch about the other matter, she said. The other matter? Richard asked, his eyes hollow. My lawsuit, Serafina said. The one you thought you could buy your way out of. That price just went up. Way up. I'm not just suing for humiliation anymore. I'm suing for damages. For the loss of the ether contract, which I, as an auditor, will now have to recommend be scrapped entirely and rebid from scratch, costing the government and all parties, including my own firm, millions. Your airline's little dispute just set back American defense AI by 5 years. She paused at the door. Oh, and Mr. Sterling, I won't be leading your new bias training. I'm going to be too busy using your money to fund a new foundation, one that will create an industry-wide certification for ethical conduct, one that your airline will never, ever pass. She left. Richard Sterling sat in the 4:00 a.m., like a ruined man, surrounded by the wreckage of his empire, finally understanding the true cost of Seat 1A. The fallout was not a storm. It was a biblical flood. The moment Robert Thorne handed the evidence, the flight logs, the email chains, the bank transfers to the Department of Justice, the story changed from a viral Karen video to one of the largest corporate scandals in a decade. The Harringtons, Caroline Harrington, and her father, William Harrington, were arrested by federal agents at their home in the Hamptons. The charge conspiracy to defraud the United States government. The hard karma was swift. The image of Caroline, her face a mask of rage and disbelief being led away in handcuffs, a cream-colored knit suit now wrinkled, was on every news channel. The trial was a sensation. Mark the flight attendant and Brenda the gate agent both flipped testifying against the Harringtons in exchange for reduced sentences. They described in detail how Caroline's assistant had approached them offering them $50,000 each to ensure a passenger was removed. She said the woman was a corporate spy and unstable. Mark cried on the stand. She said, I'd be doing the airline a favor. Caroline Harrington was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Her father, for his role in authorizing the payments, received 10. Harrington Logistics, buried under fines and unable to secure a single government contract, ever again filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. It was liquidated. The old money empire built over generations was annihilated in 6 months. Apex Air. Richard Sterling was forced to resign by his board, but it was too late. Apex Air was toxic. The federal investigation revealed a pattern of priority-based service that systematically discriminated against minority passengers. They were disqualified from the Arthur contract, and the $80 billion deal was, as Sarafina predicted, scrapped and sent back to the drawing board. The airline was fined a record $1.2 billion by the FAA and the DoD for its security lapses and its role in the conspiracy. Stock APX, once a titan, was now a penny stock delisted from the S&P 500. Within 2 years, Apex Air was bought for parts by a larger rival airline. Its name was wiped from the sky. The hero's Ben Richardson, Ben in 2B, was lauded as a hero of citizen journalism. He was hired by a major news network as a digital correspondent. His first interview, a sit-down with Dr. Sarafina Vance. Officer Sullivan and Officer Kent, the Port Authority police, were fired. Sarafina's civil suit against the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey was settled for an undisclosed but rumoured to be staggering amount. Dr. Sarafina Vance Sarafina, true to her word, took her settlement from Apex Air, which the bankruptcy court prioritised, and the Port Authority, and launched the Vance Institute for Ethical Systems. It became the new gold standard, a non-profit watchdog that audited not just airlines, but AI algorithms and corporate structures for systemic bias. She never flew Apex Air again. In fact, her first flight after the incident was on a private jet chartered by the Department of Defense, who flew her to DC to personally apologize and ask her to lead the New Ether Project's ethics board. The new contract, she warned them, would be the most scrutinized in history. The final scene of the real-life story came a year later. Sarafina Vance was at JFK again. She was in the new gleaming first-class lounge of a different airline. She was once again in a tailored blazer drinking water and preparing for a flight. A young black woman wearing the uniform of a gate agent approached her. She looked nervous. "Excuse me, Dr. Vance," she whispered. Sarafina looked up, a faint guarded tension in her shoulders. I just wanted to say thank you," the young woman said, her voice thick with emotion. "I work here. I'm a manager. Because of you, because of what you did, they changed everything. The training, the rules, how they listen. You made it so I could have a career here, so I could be seen." Sarafina looked at the young woman, and for the first time, the fortress in her eyes softened. She smiled a real warm smile. "Keep ascending," Sarafina said. "Don't let anyone stop you." She got up, gathered her briefcase, and boarded her flight. She walked to her seat. F and her. She settled in, closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she flew in peace. 3 years had passed since the day Sarafina Vance's life was torn apart in the aisle of Flight 112. The world had changed, and she had been the one to change it. She stood on the stage of the opulent main auditorium at the Walter E. Washington Convention Center. The room was packed. A sea of 5,000 faces, CEOs, senators, venture capitalists, and the heads of every major tech firm from Silicon Valley to Tel Aviv. The enormous banner behind her read, "The Vance Institute Ethical Systems Summit 2028. She was once again in a tailored blazer. This one was a brilliant sharp white. Her hair was worn in a regal, upswept style. She was not the woman who had been dragged weeping and furious through an airport terminal. She was the woman who had, in the words of Forbes, turned a moment of humiliation into a movement of accountability. "We talk about financial debt," she said, her voice calm and resonant, amplified through the state-of-the-art sound system. "But for decades, corporations have been accumulating another kind, an ethical debt. They've been borrowing against the dignity of their customers. They've been taking shortcuts at the expense of their employees' safety. They've been leveraging systemic bias because it was for a time cheaper than true equality." She paused, her gaze sweeping the front row where Robert Thorne sat. No longer just her lawyer, but the chief counsel for the Institute. Nearby, Ben Richardson, now a senior correspondent for a major network, was watching with his crew. What Apex Air and Harrington Logistics learned, she continued her voice dropping, is that this debt always comes due and the interest is catastrophic. My job, the work of the Vance Institute, is to be the auditor. We are here to call in that debt. Not with anger, but with algorithms, not with retribution, but with new unbreakable standards. We are here to make ethics profitable and to make bias finally unequivocally bankrupt. The applause was thunderous. It was a standing ovation. Seraphina Vance, the woman who had been deemed unstable and threatening, was now quite literally the one setting the rules for the entire industry. Her victory was no longer personal. It was systemic. 1,000 mi away in the humid, oppressive air of Aliceville, Alabama. The echo of that victory sounded very different. The Federal Correctional Institution. Aliceville was a world of concrete and khaki. There were no first-class lounges, no champagne, no valued flyers. There was only the laundry room, a vast steaming cavern that smelled of industrial bleach and human sweat. This was Caroline Harrington's new domain. Her 15-year sentence for conspiracy to defraud the government was being served not in a club-fed minimum security prison. Her father's lawyers had failed spectacularly in that regard. But here, her blonde helmet-like bob was gone, replaced by dull, stringy hair pulled back in a regulation hairnet. Her face, once a mask of expensive, entitled annoyance, was now etched with a permanent, weary bitterness. She was Harrington C. inmate 44791, row 18. Her job 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, was textile services. She folded sheets. She sorted the KA uniforms of her fellow inmates. The hands that had once gripped a champagne flute as she watched a woman be brutalized now wrestled with stiff, rough cotton. Her knuckles red, her fingernails broken. "Move it, first class," a voice snapped. Caroline didn't look up. The nickname had stuck, a cruel daily reminder of her spectacular hubris. The woman speaking was a 23-year-old named Destiny, in for 5 years on a drug trafficking charge. In here, Destiny was a shot caller. Caroline was nobody. The dryers are backing up Harrington. Destiny said, shoving a heavy cart of wet uniforms toward her. "You're daydreaming again, thinking about your old boyfriend, the CEO." The other women in the laundry laughed. The story was legend in the prison. I am working." Caroline stammered, her voice thin, all its aristocratic power stripped away. "You're not," Destiny said, getting in her face. "You're slow. You think you're still better than us, don't you? You think this is all a mistake." It was," Caroline whispered, a tear of self-pity rolling down her cheek. I just wanted the seat. You wanted the contract." Destiny sneered, shoving her back against the sorting table. "You wanted to ruin that doctor, and you got caught, that's all. You're no different from us. You're just a criminal who got caught. Now do your job, or you won't be eating tonight." Caroline flinched. She turned back to the pile of laundry, her hands trembling. This was her karma. It wasn't just the loss of her freedom. It was the total agonizing inversion of her status. The power she had weaponized so casually was gone. Here she was, the one who was powerless. She was the one who could be moved, dismissed, and threatened. She was in every way that mattered the one in the back of the bus. The karma for Mark the flight attendant was a quieter, slower burning desolation. After serving 10 months in a low security camp for his role in the conspiracy, he was released. He was 51 years old, a convicted felon, and his name was synonymous with corporate racism. He was, to put it mildly, unemployable. He had lost his job, his pension. His 401k was seized to pay the fines. His wife left him, taking the house in the divorce settlement. He now lived in a single-room apartment above a pawn shop in Reno, Nevada. His valued flyer days were a distant, painful memory. His job from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. was at the Lucky 7, an all-night truck stop diner on I-80. He wasn't a waiter. He wasn't even a cook. He was the night shift busboy. He was wiping down a booth at 3:00 a.m. when a trucker, blur-eyed and angry, slammed his empty coffee mug on the table. "Hey, Mr. Sunshine," the trucker barked. "I've been staring at the bottom of this cup for 10 minutes. You just going to stand there, or you going to get me a refill?" Mark flinched. The name, the tone. It was a phantom limb of his old authority. My apologies, sir." He mumbled his old plastic smile, emerging as a twitching grimace. "Right away, more coffee." He scurried back to the counter, his cheap polyester uniform smelling of stale grease. He grabbed the coffee pot. As he passed the mirrored wall of the diner, he caught his own reflection. He saw a tired, broken old man, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. He saw the ghost of the man in the crisp Apex uniform, the man who held the power to decide who belonged and who didn't. He had built his identity on the small, petty authority of his uniform. He had relished the power to enforce the rules. Now he had no power, no authority. He was invisible. He was just the man who cleared the tables. It was a quiet, suffocating, and utterly complete fall. Back in her suite at the hotel, Serafina was winding down. The summit had been a stunning success, securing another $20 million in funding for the institute. Robert Thorne knocked and entered, holding a tablet. "It's done," he said, a rare, wide smile on his face. "The auction?" she asked. "The final auction from the Harrington Logistics bankruptcy. The creditors were selling off the last of the intangible assets. Trademarks, branding, logos, all worthless, of course, except we bought one." He handed her the tablet. It was a deed of sale. For the sum of $10,000, the Vance Institute was now the legal owner of the trademark brand and all associated intellectual property for Harrington Logistics. "It's a poetic little trophy," Robert said. "What are you going to do with it? Let it expire?" Serafina looked at the name that had tried to destroy her, the name that represented a generation of entitled old-world power. "No," she said softly. "I'm not going to let it expire. I'm going to give it new life." She sat at her desk, her fingers flying across her laptop. She opened the Vance Institute's donation portal and began a new public fund. The Harrington Fund. She typed a new legal aid initiative dedicated to providing pro bono counsel for victims of corporate and racial discrimination. She attached the newly acquired trademark to the fund. The name Harrington Logistics, once a symbol of corrupt exclusive power, would now be the banner under which thousands of new fights for justice would be funded. The money from the bankruptcy, the dregs of that fallen empire, would be the seed corn for its exact opposite. Robert Thorne read the screen and let out a low whistle. "Serafina," he said, "you didn't just win. You didn't just salt the earth. You've taken the salt and used it to grow a new forest." Serafina hit publish. The fund was live. She stood and walked to the floor, to a ceiling window, looking out over the lights of Washington, D.C. The police station, the ripped blazer, the feeling of absolute bone-deep humiliation. It all felt like another lifetime. She had been dragged from her seat. Now she owned the table. She hadn't just gotten justice. She had redefined it. The karma wasn't just a boomerang that had come back to hit her enemies. It was a new system she had built piece by piece from the rubble of the old, and it was just getting started. The fall of Harrington Logistics and Apex Air was just the beginning. Dr. Vance's foundation has changed the rules for buyers in travel and in tech. This wasn't just a story about one flight. It's a story about what happens when systemic power meets individual integrity. The karma was not just a twist of fate. It was a carefully aimed missile, launched by a woman who refused to be erased. Do you think the karma was enough? Who was the real villain? The entitled Caroline, the complicit Mark, or the negligent CEO? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe that justice must be served no matter how high up, then, like this video, share it with everyone, and subscribe to our channel for more true stories of karma and vindication. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss a moment of justice being served.